Hi, I'm Mark Vandroff. I'm the commanding officer of Naval Surface Warfare Center, Carderock, and I'm here today to talk to you about participating program managers. So I'm going to talk about what is a participating program manager, and we're going to use the acronym PARM, why a program might have a PARM. I'm going to talk about the best practices from a tactical standpoint. I'm going to talk about best practices of managing PARMs from a strategic standpoint, talk a little bit about my personal experience, and tell some PARM-C stories. So what is a PARM? If you're a program manager, a DoD major program manager, a PARM is another DoD program manager who's going to spend your program resources to deliver your program or product that you require to meet your requirements. That PARM is going to have their own PEO, service acquisition executive, defense acquisition executive reporting chain, depending on their acquisition category. PARM might very well have a different resource sponsor in the service staff than you. And a PARM is going to have its own program documentation, its own acquisition strategy, its own JSIDS requirement, its own budget documents, its own temp, test and evaluation master plan, separate from your program, yet it's still providing a product that your program has to have to meet its requirements. Usually there'll be some formal document, an MOU or a program directive that codifies this relationship. As an example, the engine for an aircraft program, the radar for a ship program, or a radio program manager that's delivering radio equipment to multiple different users. Those are all examples of PARM program managers. Now, why would you have a PARM, right? Why would you do that? The first one is from a service standpoint, PARMs create commonality. It makes no sense, or it might make no sense for the government or the service to have multiple different solutions across different acquisition efforts. And again, I use the classic example of a radio. You might have 6 or 7 different ship programs. You don't want them to all have 6 or 7 different radio solutions. You want them to all have the same radio solution. So you create a program for the radio. Second reason you would have a PARM is for competency. A lot of what the Department of Defense buys is very technical and it's very specific. The skills that you would want for a ship or an aircraft program manager, the knowledge of hydrodynamics or aerodynamics, might not translate into the program manager for the IT systems you're going to put on that ship or aircraft. You want a very different program manager with a very different skill set. And finally, the government might choose to have a PARM because of control. There frankly are some things you don't want your lead industry partner buying, either for reasons of classification or because it doesn't fit within their skill set or because the government might be able to buy them more cost effectively. Now, the downside for all of those is when the government decides to do it itself and have a PARM, the government, not the prime contractor, now owns the schedule and cost risk associated with that effort. So let me give you some tactical best practices if you're a program manager and you have PARMs. First, you need a dedicated PARM management team in the program office. In fact, in the program office that I was the program manager for, the DDG 51 program, our PEO had a separate, since all of the program managers under that had multiple PARMs, there was a separate PEO staff code for PARM management. They provided PARM management services to each of the programs in the PEO. You might do it that way with your PEO, or your program might have its own dedicated PARM team, but you cannot have this managed as a collateral duty. You have to have regular PARM reviews. You have to have a drumbeat of meetings where the PARM will brief the program on their cost, on their schedule, on their progress towards meeting your goals. You need to have an IPT for program schedules. You've got to have their schedules and your schedules synced up, and you have to have a dedicated IPT that meets on regular intervals to keep those schedules synced up. You have to have an IPT for budget documents. Your budget documents plus the PARM's budget documents have to match. They have to be complementary to each other. You need to have an IPT for the development of that. You need to have an IPT to resolve joint technical issues, because some technical issues will only be able to be solved by the platform or the lead program and its PARMs working together. Ideally, you would have cross-program membership in any source selection teams between the PARM and the Prime PM, and you would have cross-program attendance at all the regular industry reviews. Again, classic example, a ship and a radar program, the radar going on the ship, you would have folks from that radar program at the shipbuilding program reviews, and you'd have key folks from the ship's program at the radar program reviews, just so that both sides understand where the other program's at and where the industry partners are at. That's tactical. Now let me talk to you about strategic. And if you take nothing away from this presentation, nothing in this replaces a personal relationship between the program managers, especially when you're talking about multiple major programs, usually run at the 06 or GS15 level. Those program managers have to be in sync with each other. They have to have a strong personal relationship. They have to be able to pick up the phone and talk to each other when there are issues. Ideally, they should attend each other's congressional staffer briefs. They should attend each other's briefs, major briefs to their PEOs, SAEs, and DAEs, and Defense Acquisition Executive. Again, in my personal experience, whenever I went up to brief the Navy's acquisition executive on something where there was a significant PARM issue, the PARM and I were in the room together. When there is engagements with press, especially during the new development where you're fielding a new PARM system onto an existing platform, that should be joint. So you're giving one message to the press from both program managers. And ideally, you would have joint customer reviews. In the Navy case, that would be a type commander or other key customer users and other services. You should be a joint engagement with those customers across multiple PMs. Nothing can replace those PMs being able to create a team and working together at the PM level. So what is my experience with PARMs? I have been dealing with PARMs my entire career. My first assignment in acquisition was as the Aegis Test Officer in Pascagoula, Mississippi, charged with conducting testing on the combat system of new construction destroyers built by Ingalls Shipbuilding. I had a 150 person team that was entirely staffed by people, different PARMs for different systems on that ship, sent to me, and I had to coordinate all of their efforts in order to get complete ship testing done. And then I served in the DDG 51 program office after that, and again I was part of several IPTs with my PARMs for both technical, budgetary, and schedule issues. When I was in the Navy's LPD-17 program office as the Fleet Introduction Officer, I was part of several IPTs with my PARMs that resolved several technical issues. I was the Deputy Program Manager for the LPD-17 program. That was an ACAT-1C program that had over 30 PARMs. And I was the Program Manager for the DDG-51 program. I had over 50 PARMs, and of those 50 PARMs, I was an ACAT-1D program, and 3 of my PARMs, the Air and Missile Defense Radar, the SM-6 missile, and cooperative engagement capability, were also ACAT-1D programs. So on my ship, I had 3 other major programs, all of which had reporting up to the Defense Acquisition Executive. So let me tell some C stories of ways that I've seen successfully managed PARMs. The first one is the upgrade to the DDG-51 program, which is known as Flight 3, which is the incorporation of the Navy's Air and Missile Defense Radar onto the Flight 3. This was and is an incredibly complicated program. You had a ship procurement and building schedule that had to be synced up with the developmental schedule of the radar, that had to be synced up with the developmental schedule of the combat system to both connect the ship to that radar and service the radar, which was another program. Plus you had, since the program was designed, the radar was designed primarily to enhance the ship's missile defense efforts, you had a separate line of effort for missile defense from the Missile Defense Agency, an agency part of DoD but outside the Navy. And then you had an additional, in order to service the radar, you had a significant electric plant upgrade, and that had its own separate program manager within the Naval Sea Systems Command. 5 different major program managers all had to keep their schedules synced. We had what came to be known as the 5-way schedule. We had a common schedule between all 5 of those programs, all signed by all 5 of those program managers and updated on a regular basis, and a regular drumbeat between the 5 program managers to make sure that as schedules changed, as things were altered, that we stayed focused, we knew what each other's key objectives were, and that we knew that any schedule impact any one of those 5 might have would have on the other 4 participants. Another example, smaller, but at a more junior level, when I was earlier in my career in the LPD-17 program. We had a classic PARM technical problem that was a PARM ship interface. The SPS-48 Echo radar, which is a 3D air search radar that the Navy had used for many years, was put in the brand new composite mast of an LPD-17. Modeling and simulation had only gone so far at that point. There were unknown technical challenges in putting that radar inside that composite mast that weren't known until we actually sailed the ship for the very first time. And we saw that the mast was creating an unacceptable level of interference with the radar. Now, part of this was due to the configuration of the radar, part of this was due to the ship's mast, and the solution lied in alterations to both the radar and the mast through that problem. That required a joint technical team. There was not something that the radar guys could solve, and it wasn't something that the ship could solve. It was something that had to be solved together. And we had, and if you ever want to Google the paper, Good Fences Make Good Neighbor, we implied it. Good fences make good neighbors. We employed a radar technique known as a radar fence. Those fences are deployed now on all the LPD-17 ships that the Navy has. The Navy's up to 10 of them. It greatly enhanced the radar performance so that radar was able to satisfactorily meet all of its key requirements once it had been appropriately fenced. And that was something that came out of a joint IPT between the ship program and its affected PARMs. So again, having a program, having a set of PARMs within your program can be a challenge. You have multiple lines of effort that have to be coordinated and taken care of together. But if done properly, you can really advance your program and you can get great value for your service with proper program management, with proper PARM management. I'm Mark Vandroff. Good day.